So we have one.
I got a notification. Meeting is now streaming live. Fancy
Ready?
schmancy.
Fancy technology. Yes, we are good to go.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. And before we get started, I would like to read the conflict of interest statement that should remind everybody that members of the State Bar Editorial Board are advised of their duty under the State Government Ethics Act to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflict, and are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this board with respect to which there is a conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict. Are there any things that are on the agenda that anybody wants to flag as having a potential conflict of interest? Nope. Okay. That being the case, does everybody have their agenda in front of them? Before we get started on the agenda, this is something that wasn't included, but something that I wanted to address. And that is when we were reading the articles that through the last semester, the last quarter, there was something that came up about the Supreme Court traveling articles. And I just wanted to see if anybody has any questions or if you want to discuss that. But after speaking with Jennifer, she reminded me that the reason why we got 2 articles is that she went to the Supreme Court and invited anybody who wanted to write an article to do so. And then she also reminded me that in a previous meeting that we had, we were looking for something more than just the fact that they were doing it. We were looking for some stories that might have popped up from their experiences and some unique personalized stories. And I don't think that we got any of that from the 2 articles that were presented, even though we liked both articles equally. So I think the challenge that we're going to have is to decide today, do we want to go ahead and publish one or both of these articles, or do we want to go back and see if we can get some more of those personalized experiences from the Supreme Court justices? Does anybody have any thoughts about that? No?
I think the stories would certainly be more riveting if we had some things that we could pull out of them, and maybe, having a phone conversation with them you might be able to accomplish that.
Mm-hmm. So the follow-up can be done, and I guess how strongly do we feel about the follow-up? How strongly do we feel about those articles? We are not obligated to publish either one of them. So, we do have a lot of articles that you'll see on the list that have been approved. So I don't like to give up on that. I think it's still relevant. I think that it's nice to hear some perspective from the Supreme Court justices. I think it's a great public story about the traveling. But we ended up with 2 very, in my opinion, very similar articles. And, to publish both of them might be a little awkward. To pick one over the other, since they were both very well written, might be awkward. So, so Camille, we can go back. And I think Jennifer said she was comfortable doing that, right?
Yeah, because I don't know that we really got what we wanted, because I don't remember who shared the story, but they were saying that at one of the stops, the justices, I want to say father or grandfather, had been a judge in that county, and they hung his portrait behind the chair where the visiting justice was sitting. And so, I was looking for more content like that, like some really special moving moments that were impactful to the justices, not just we arrived here at this time and this many people came out and this is what we talked about. Like, I'm not looking for that. I want to know what their feelings were personally about traveling the state and visiting the different counties and meeting different people and that sort of thing. So I'm perfectly fine going back, and we can even take, the 2 articles that we have, and Andrea and I had discussed maybe taking pieces from each and sort of putting them together into some one piece, and then maybe we can I can maybe get a little more flavor from my contact at the court who worked on getting these 2 articles. So maybe let's keep pursuing it, but not settle for what, it doesn't sound like we want to settle for what we have.
I guess my question to the board would be, are you comfortable with us going forward like that? Or do you have any other suggestions? Or do you want us just to pick one or the other or both and just publish without any more effort?
I think Jennifer's suggestion is right on. I was thinking, let's at least take the 2 articles and do a mashup so that we have, it's cool that they did it. And there's some flavor of the experience in both of those articles.
Right.
But they are, it doesn't make sense to repeat things, which is what the 2 do to some extent. So I think it's a great idea. Like, I don't know, but you, Jennifer, or your contact at the court will act as a reporter, essentially.
Yeah.
Take these and mash them together, add some color, and we may have something that'll pop.
Okay.
Agreed.
With that too, but I'm wondering if, Jennifer, when you go back, if you couldn't request that we ask each of the 7, and we've got 2 now, for the most meaningful moment they had on their statewide tour that was personally meaningful to them, not that 400 people showed up or whatever it was, but it was a personal moment to them. And then there could be a preface to the article about what the tour was, the who, what, when, where, why of the tour, how many counties were covered,
Yeah.
just the facts, ma'am, and then their personal impressions.
Yeah, so just building on that, Jennifer, as far as the article goes, we could, you could start it by saying we asked the Supreme Court justices to give us their highlights or an anecdote about what was the most meaningful moment to them, and then just structure it that way where you just give those anecdotes.
Yeah.
And it would be nice
I'll
if
try
just if
again.
they
I mean,
would-
that's really what I did initially. So,
Yeah.
and that's not what we got, but I'll go back and we'll
So maybe
revisit
just
that.
ask them, I'm just thinking, ask them not to write an article, just give us a paragraph.
Okay.
Like, in other words, just try to get it from all of them. If they would all be willing to just write one paragraph and email it so that we can include, each one's anecdote, or, if they would do that, I think it would be a lot easier for them just to give a paragraph on something that they thought about or that they enjoyed, and then to ask them to write an article. So, okay, we'll see what we get. Does that sound, you have a look on your face like that might not work. So I'll just leave it up to you, what you feel comfortable.
Again, that is what I asked for initially.
Yeah,
I didn't ask for each justice to write a 5-page article. I just said, throw it out there to all of them, ask them what were the big moments of the tour.
Okay.
And,
that's what we got.
And that's
All
what we got.
right.
But
Okay.
I'm willing to go back to the drawing board and just say, what we got isn't really what we wanted. And if you want something published about this, you need to get us what we want.
Okay.
And that's fine. I think that's
works
fair.
for me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So you'll see in your agenda that we have the winter 2020 edition lineup. And Jennifer, I don't know if there's anything you want to comment on with that lineup.
We have got, as you see below, we've got a lot of approved articles right now. So I just tried to pick some things that were timely, or maybe even past timely, as far as like the Confederate statue article is concerned. My comment to Andrea wasn't it fun when, 8 months ago, Confederate statues were like, whoa, it's all over the news.
Yeah.
And now you don't hear anything about it. But so we've got like a COVID article. I think that improving mechanics to justice is really relevant now that people are at home and the courts are sort of retooling what they're doing. The remarks from Wade Smith are actually from Colin's inauguration as president. So we really need to get that published. And then the Faith and Justice Alliance was just launched. So I don't want to wait another issue and have that be sort of old news.
Okay. All right. And
And
then,
I'll try to pepper in, I mean, if I can fit some of these articles, some, like the Rufus article or the Judge Rousseau article, some of those are really small. And sometimes I just have a page or two to fill, or even 3 pages to fill. And so I will try to get those in like as timely as I can.
okay. So, right. So you'll see under the winter 2020 edition list, we have the other approved articles. So the status right now is really good. We've got a lot of articles to choose from. And so, sometimes we're struggling, sometimes we're not. But right now, because we have a lot of articles to choose from, our biggest challenge has been keeping some of the articles relevant, at the forefront, because we don't want to lose their relevancy or their timeliness. So like Jennifer said, we're working on that. And if you have any thoughts or suggestions on any particular article, then feel free to share those with us. Otherwise, we'll go into the ones that are currently in the works, and we can talk about that. I don't have any under my name. I think this is the first time I haven't had any in the works, but I'll try to think of something for next meeting. But Camille, you have this one with Monica Webb Shackelford. Is there any update on that?
So I did check in with her just to make sure she's still okay with the December 15 deadline. And so she's working towards that. Okay.
So one thing I noted, Darren is not on the call today, but when I saw what Monica is working on, and then I saw, if you look down in Darren's list, it says the implicit bias with Kim Crouch, and I was concerned that those might be similar. And Jennifer, I don't know if you know any more detail on those, or Camille, did you notice that? I mean, they may be completely different, but they look like they were hitting on a similar topic. So I think we need to be careful if we are giving them guidance.
So I think the guidance to Monica is write an article about what law firms can be doing to improve their diversity and inclusion efforts, which would include, it might be things like you could bring in coaches or consultants to do A, B, and C. Here's a list of free resources you could use. And one component of that is implicit bias training. You could do that. Okay. And then I thought the other article would be about implicit bias training, what it is, what implicit bias is, and then what you do to figure out what it is and whether, how to work around it, et cetera. So I sort of see implicit bias as a piece of diversity inclusion, but Monica's article to be the broad overview article with direct lawyers to do.
I can see that, and I can see those two articles being in the same edition.
Complementary.
Right. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, Jennifer, have you had a chance to follow up with Darren at all? We can, I'm sure, outside of the meeting, but it would be good to know if he made contact with her. Okay. So I guess with Darren's list, we'll go ahead and skip that now, and then just try to get an update from him. Maybe next meeting, we can check with him ahead of time to see if he's going to be able to attend. If not, he can just give us his update. Same thing with Gray. Does anybody have any updates on Gray's?
I believe that he got that Bobbitt interview transcript from Tom.
Okay.
Or no, not Tom. I'm getting my people confused.
No, from Tom Keith.
No, because that's the Klan Nazi. It was that Bobbitt interview, and it was his nephew or somebody. oh, I'm just drawing a blank on his name. It's been in the works for like 2 years.
Mhm.
Anyway, he did actually get the article from him, and he was going to try to pare it down, although it didn't sound like it was going to be too long for our publication, but I think he wanted to clean it up a little bit. So hopefully that'll be coming, because it's been a long time coming.
Okay.
So we'll see. Other than that, I haven't heard from Greg. I don't have any updates from him.
All right. So we will skip Heidi's, and then we get is Robin? Yeah, there's Robin. So in Jennifer's list, we've got hang on, the former lap board member Chris Budnick. Is there any progress on that?
Well, they just agreed to write it, so they're going to
Okay.
be writing that for the December 15th.
Okay. What about the cybersecurity committee? Peter, do you know if that article's gonna be?
I don't know. Let me check with Brian. I'll be back in. I'll tell you in 30 seconds.
Okay. Jennifer, there was also on this list whether we wanted to discuss the publication of any commencement speeches. We haven't had any that were noteworthy recently, but I guess we can always keep that at the forefront if we hear of any or listen to any that we think are meaningful.
I kind of stopped. I wanted to reach out to my communications people that submit their articles every quarter for that law school briefs.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was looking at that, we were all in shutdown, and I figured, well, they're going to be at home. They're not going to have access to their archives, because we were looking for actually some archival speeches, like, it doesn't have to be recent, but just some prominent people who maybe gave a commencement speech. So I kind of just put that on the back burner, figuring, no one's going to be in the office to be.
How far can you go back? I'm wondering, it might be interesting to hear a commencement speech, not just from 10 years ago, but from like another generation, to see whether what was said back then is still relevant.
Yeah.
So how far did they go back? Do you know?
Oh, I have no idea. Yeah. I imagine it differs for each university.
Okay. All right. All right, I'm just going to stop and see if anybody has any thoughts. I mean, I'm just going through the list, but if anybody wanted to say something, I just wanted to just give you an opportunity to, since we're kind of midway through the meeting. It looks like we're going to have a short meeting today.
Yeah, I just want to note, Darren, I think, has joined us, and Barbara as well.
Oh, okay.
And I know you were mentioning something that Darren was.
We were. So, hi, Darren. Hi, Barbara. So Darren, can you hear me?
Darren, you're muted. Maybe he has to be muted.
Okay.
I don't know.
There he goes.
Oh.
There he is.
Barbara, can we just do a test to see if you're?
Darren, you're not muted anymore. If you want to try a test.
Barbara?
Yes.
Okay, we just wanted to check and make sure we were connected.
Yes, I can hear you, and it's fine. And Darren shows is unmuted. I don't know.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us.
I just checked with Brian about cybersecurity. He said they've shifted their focus towards a survey that they're working on with PMBR, that they don't anticipate an article anytime in the short term.
Okay, so we would just take that off the list, Jennifer.
Okay.
So Margaret.
I'm right here. Yeah, just unmute.
Yeah, so can you update us? Looks like you've done some homework.
I've gotten a little confused about Philip. That article about the Confederate graves, markers, and statues, I remember that article. He sort of had different levels of concern about the monuments. Like a grave is a grave is a grave, but a monument put up in the 20s is a different thing. Is that the one you're talking about? Is it that article?
That sounds familiar. I think that's what we're talking about.
Okay, that was not for us though, was it?
No, I think he already wrote it and we were just going to maybe see about republishing it.
Okay, I think I'm sorry to say I've dropped the ball on that. I will email him when we get off this phone call and ask if we can reprint that, because I thought it made perfect sense. He said that a memorial to a person who died in the war, or a grave commemorates a person or recognizes a person. But these statues that went up during the Jim Crow era are a different level of, it's just a different thing. And that's what we're fighting over. The article made good sense to me.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember where I read it.
Yeah.
So I've seen in the news, although I can't give you a specific example, but it seems like there's been some effort to replace statues and with new people and new figures. And I don't know if he could touch on that, or if we could see about somebody else touching on that. But it's kind of like the old and the new, and the ones that have been taken down now that are being replaced by more recent or relevant people.
I will inquire about that too, because I think you're right. I think they are putting up more contemporary things. So I'll ask him about that too.
Okay.
I know UNCW is in virtual session, so I'm assuming or hoping he has access to his computer materials now.
Hey, Margaret.
Yeah.
I think, did he also say that he would be interested in writing something on the anniversary of the 19th Amendment, but he didn't have access to his?
Yes, that's what he said at one point, but that's been some time, and I will inquire about that too.
Yeah, if he's still interested in that, I think that would be great as well. And I'd be happy to, we could spread out 2 different articles if he wants to reprint the one, and if he still wants to work on the 19th Amendment.
I will ask him.
That would be good. So
yeah, I'll do it as soon as we hang up.
Thanks, Margaret.
So Peter, there was some talk last time about approaching MAC.
Yeah, I did not go talk to Mac about this. I wanted to. There hasn't been a minor league season this year, and I kind of wanted to see if I think it might be more useful for a spring, submission into the summer when minor leagues are hopefully going again. But I will talk to him this week about it.
Okay, so we can just at least keep it on the list.
Keep it, yeah.
Okay. All right, Stephen, you're next. Have you had a chance to talk to John?
I did talk to John, and he would be willing to take a stab at it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, he said he got there toward the very tail end of a lot of moonshining action and may have been involved in a few cases himself. He had an interesting statistic about the number of ATF agents that were in that area when he hit town versus 0 today. So it's kind of a historical thing that's come and gone. But he said he lost a partner, died a few years ago. He said he would have been the guy.
Oh, really? Yeah.
But he said we could probably come up with something pretty good, and if we couldn't, we'd make it up and nobody would really know.
Shame.
Well, if it doesn't work, I have a good moonshine story for you that involves cooking.
Good.
I'll tell you.
Boring.
It involves Italian cooking and moonshine.
A fire, I trust.
All good stories start with Italian cooking and moonshine.
Okay, let's see. Tom is not here. So, and this is one that is not timely anyway. But I don't want to give up on it. This is the one where we asked Tom and he agreed to interview 2 lawyers that were state legislators. And if you remember, we talked about it a year or so ago. This it's not good timing now, but once the election is over, I would like to revisit that, because I do think that it doesn't matter what year it is. I think it's going to be relevant. And I know that we're trying to get more people in the legislature, so more attorneys in the legislature. So let's keep
Tom
that
did
on the list.
respond. Andrea, Tom did respond to my text message and said that he actually had a doctor's appointment. He's back from Bald Head and had his doctor's appointment. So he's not done playing hooky for a bad reason. And I will tell him that he's still on the hook for that article.
Yeah, and it might be a good thing to work on in the winter, you know, like after the first of the year. So when things settle for everybody.
Are they current legislators or former?
Well, we didn't pick them really. I mean, we talked about a couple, like Sydney Batch for one, and we wanted to get, you know, both political parties so we can get feedback from both, and it was balanced. And you know, the idea is just attorneys that are working in the legislature and what their experiences are and how they're balancing work and family and legislative duties. And so it's going to be relevant even after the election. So
To say, I really like that idea, but we did that, Jennifer. You remember sometime maybe within the last decade, we did that with, I think maybe it was Deborah Ross. And we, do you remember this at all, Jennifer?
I don't, but that's not a surprise. But I thought part of this article too was talking about their experience in actually running for office. Yeah, Margaret, I'm just drawing a blank on that. I'm not sure.
Can you search and find that thing? Because it's been since I've been part
Margaret,
of.
you're right. I just found it on a.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Was it Deborah Ross?
It was titled Attorneys in the North Carolina General Assembly by Margaret Dixon. And
Good memory, Margaret.
Stop it.
No, I did. I just remembered that we did it, but I thought that I wrote it. But I can't even remember what I wrote.
it was about you. It was Deborah Ross, Joe Hackney, Mickey Michaud. Looked like you interviewed them.
Obviously, we didn't worry about partisan stuff.
No, not at the time. Yeah, that was summer of 2013.
Okay.
Okay.
But I still think it's relevant anytime because
Margaret, if you and I don't remember it, I doubt that any of our readers will remember it.
But I think it's certainly instructive to anybody who might be thinking about running to hear what it's like from the horse's mouth.
Right.
This also raises the question, what if we follow, I don't know what the article, how it reads or what method you use, but what if we did the same thing now? And, you know, to the extent we could compare what was going on in 2013 to what's going on today, and in that context might be interesting.
Well, in those people were all Democrats. In 2013, the Republicans were in control. So I don't remember, the article probably wasn't about that. I think it's
more about personal life work.
And the demands on your time and what it means for your practice if you're still trying to practice.
Jennifer, if you could email, or Peter, if you've pulled it up, if you could just email it to us, I would be interested in reading it when we get to the point where we're talking about Tom doing it and giving him ideas.
Sure, I'll print those pages to a PDF and email it to you guys right now.
Yeah, that would be great. And that way, you know, if we want Tom to, if he's going to be interviewing them and we want him to ask any particular questions, this might be good to get some ideas on what might be interesting. So
and I don't know if the number of attorneys has gone up or down since 2013.
My guess is it's gone down, but I could be wrong. I don't know. I've heard that I've kind of heard the opposite, that there are more and more non-attorneys there.
You know
So
what's really great to be able to find out? Margaret put the numbers in the article.
Oh, okay, good.
It has the number of attorneys serving in the General Assembly. It tracks it from 1999 in the Senate and from 1985 in the House all the way to 2011. So we'll.
That's great. I'm definitely interested in that because there's a
Yeah.
perception, I think, that at least my perception is that there are less, but if I'm wrong, that would be good, I think.
Well, the occupations are self-reported. You know, you are whatever you say you are, but at
Mhm.
least you're an attorney is clear cut. You either are one or you're not one.
Mhm.
Being you know, something else is you make it up yourself. So
Good. Okay, great. Thanks. So that brings us to the last part of the agenda, which is brainstorming and seeing if anybody has any new ideas that we can start developing.
well, what I have thought of something. You know, we discussed earlier this year articles on gerrymandering. Well, there were a number of bills in the legislature last session, about gerrymandering and how to approach it, how to look, perhaps have an independent commission or something else to address the extreme gerrymandering that has gone on. Well, of course, COVID shut all that down. Nothing got passed that wasn't absolutely necessary. And maybe that's a good thing, because if we did an article like that after the election, you know, people won't be as nervous about it going into a new session of the General Assembly. And I feel confident that there will be bills again in the coming session. But we could look back, if y'all are interested, in the kinds of bills that were proposed in the last session. One had to do with a constitutional amendment. There were several versions of independent or bipartisan commission. None went anywhere, but they were out there, and I think they'll be back in the hopper, and we could develop an article like that if y'all think that's an interesting thing for attorneys.
Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I would just second the idea. I think again, once we're clear of the election, it will be interesting to know, having just gone through a census, what the lay of the land looks like. And North Carolina, and I don't know if you tie this into the theme, but has gained some notoriety after the death of the statistician, I think was his profession, who helped write the maps, draw the maps for the Republicans, and posthumously, some of his work came out and was the subject of, or it was introduced as evidence in some of the litigation, I think.
Well, I think that people all over the country, and certainly in North Carolina, have a much better understanding of what gerrymandering means now than they did, say, in 2010. Now that we've been through a decade of lawsuits and the whole thing.
And a decade of statistical sophistication.
Absolutely.
It's
It's like slice and dice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously a lot of interest in it now since it affects both sides.
Right.
Margaret, I think you make a good point, like a bigger story along with focusing on the past of the gerrymandering, but there will be a redrawing of districts, using kind of that as a fact because of the census. And then I think an article kind of tracing the history of gerrymandering after a census and those kinds of things. And then certainly the efforts to try to create a less partisan process would all be a really good article together. If there's a change in leadership in the legislature, there seems to be a commitment to a nonpartisan redistricting, but that's easier said when you're not in power. So both parties have said those things in the past, and so it'll be interesting.
There's no question, Peter. And I was part of one of those bills, not part of the bill, but part of the group behind the bill. And the Republican leadership toward the end was much more interested in pursuing some of those ideas than they had been in the past. And I think that was in part due to the coming election. And you're absolutely right. If the balance of power changes, we don't know how the Democrats will feel about it. They've said a lot about it, but whether that would turn into concrete steps remains to be seen.
So does anybody have any thoughts on an individual that would be a good candidate to approach about writing this, or should we just kind of keep the subject matter on the list
Well,
and then make the decision after the election?
I have an idea that I'll just toss out to y'all. This young attorney, excuse me, here in Raleigh, who was the executive director of the group that Tom Ross formed called it was a bipartisan group. It was not partisan, of both Democrats and Republicans. And she was the executive director of that group. And the group, when nothing happened, the group still exists, but she's gone back to practicing law. She's no longer the executive director. But I was thinking of approaching her about writing the article and including the elements of the other bills that were also in the hopper last time. And I guess we can ask her to address the history too. Y'all probably know who this is. Her name is Mary Wills Bodie. Her dad's an attorney in Raleigh, John Bodie. You know, I'm sure there are other people who could write it too, but she has some fresh background in it.
So do you know her personally, Margaret?
I do.
Okay, I guess it's worth just asking her if she's interested in writing an article.
Okay.
And then maybe asking her, telling her what we talked about, and then asking her if she has any particular angle that would be near and dear to her, that would give her incentive. And
yeah, I'm happy to ask her that.
Okay.
And Peter, if you want to give her some guidance about what you think the shape of the article, that would be good too.
Yeah, and I think another person to have her talk with or bring into the project could be Chuck McGrady, lawyer. Just recently, he's retired. Retiring from the General Assembly. He's a Republican lawyer from Hendersonville, but he's been adamant his whole career for nonpartisan redistricting process. So he would be a good one to bring into.
Well, he was on our board and he was the primary sponsor of the legislation that I'm talking about. So yes, she would absolutely, sure, contact him.
Great.
So Margaret, just a question. So I think Tom Ross's article kind of gave an overview of the history, not necessarily in North Carolina, of gerrymandering. Is that my correct recollection? And this would be more specific to what North Carolina is trying to do to end it in our state.
Yes, Tom's article, as I remember, maybe y'all could resend that one too, but his was more about why gerrymandering is a problem. Generally speaking, for no matter who does it, it's a problem. And I don't think he got down to the particulars of any legislation.
I think it would be good to if we ever get this article published, to have a link to his article, because that was really good. Just to give a background to people who don't quite understand what it is, why it matters, all of that.
Yeah.
Kind of his basic overall history of it. And then how are we addressing it here?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to do. And part of the problem is that gerrymandering, somebody described it as everything you hated about high school civics. It's just not a really interesting topic, but it's a really important topic. So yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
I had a couple of thoughts, but before I get into mine, does anybody else have ideas to share?
I don't have an agenda, so I don't know if there's I have never seen the agenda for this meeting, but I was asked to join this committee meeting. I had sent a memo on behalf of the LAP board on diversity and inclusion issues, and there was just a brainstorm sort of shotgun approach of ideas listed, and one of the ideas was having some kind of a regular minority view column in the State Bar Journal. And it was just an idea. It was, you know, whether that minority view is a person of color or female, I don't know. It was just an idea. And so I was asked to come to the publications board and sort of throw that out as an idea. And just to let you guys know, when when Ashley was writing the articles about people of color, first she wrote one about gender, and then she wrote one about people of color. And I published my article called Imagine, and I had sent it to several people in the African American bar leadership for feedback, and I sent it to everybody for feedback. And but in the course of that conversation, I had said, you know, would there be any interest in this? And there was expressed interest. And then when I followed up asking if anybody was interested in coming to the publications committee, I didn't really get any follow-up. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there to the committee. And if there is a interest on the part of the committee, I can certainly put the committee in touch with some people who might be interested.
Or the opposite, Robin, like if you know somebody who's interested, I'm just wondering, and Jennifer, you can chime in on this. If we could start with like one article before we make a commitment to have a whole, you know, ongoing section. Let's just look at 1 or 2 articles even. We can go ahead and publish them, and if they are well received, well written, and they seem to kind of balance what we're doing, then, you know, I'm not opposed to it. I just don't really have any idea of what it would look like and how it would read. But maybe we just start by saying, well, let's just try to publish something.
Do some feature articles like we have, like, yeah, like the last one that we had about the stories of racism. Did they have any topics, or they were just saying we should have a column? Did you all like brainstorm any ideas of like what would be?
I had drafted the memo, and I just said to a couple of folks, hey, is there some interest maybe in having some kind of regular column? And someone emailed back and said, yeah, that sounds great. But then I didn't get any follow-up. So
I wonder if there's no follow-up, then where will the drive be to submit something every single quarter?
Exactly.
Whereas if you want to submit something as a feature, then whenever, you know, lightning strikes and you have an idea, just submit it. And we're always open to, you know, looking at anything that's well written and topical and hot button issues, all of that stuff. So rather than have the pressure of every quarter, we have to make sure we send 3,500 words, somebody find a topic that, you know, if they were jumping at the bit and saying, like, you know, 5 people threw their hands up and said, I want to come to the meeting, I want to take this on. But if nobody's done that yet, and maybe somebody will, I mean.
Well, I'll just convey it back to bar leadership, to minority bar leadership, that the publications committee is happy to welcome any feature articles. And you know, they have this experience with Ashley having written these 2 articles already that, so they know the publications committee is welcoming of, you know, content from a minority viewpoint and on issues like implicit bias and all that.
We even have a 3rd article from Ashley, and I might have forgotten to put it on our list of other approved articles, but she wrote a whole article about natural hair. And, you know, the view and kind of some of the bias of African-American women or Black women and their natural hair.
Apparently, I've learned this at the Minority Outreach Conference. They get asked all the time from all kinds of people, can I touch your hair? And I'm like, you're kidding. But
kind of like a pregnant woman and being asked if somebody can touch your belly.
Yeah. And
that was my experience
all the time.
In China, people would come up and want to touch my hair.
Well, I can tell you one thing that I have found very fascinating and interesting is to read the stories of people who have been have had experiences where there's been judicial bias against them, or attorneys have said or done things that are just abhorrent. And you know, and you think that it's a wake-up call, because not every district is bad, not every judge is bad, obviously, but when you have some of these stories it's a wake-up call that reminds us that this is still going on, even if we don't see it. Like, I don't see it, fortunately, in my district, but you know, it's important to know that they're still going on so that we can be aware of it, I think.
Well, and
But yeah,
part
I would
of,
welcome that.
and that's what I've also learned at the Minority Outreach Conference. Part of it isn't visible to me because I'm not, yeah, I mean, if I'm not there when it actually happens, I'm not going to know.
Right.
So,
Yeah, but when you read about it, it's in your face and you have to at least think about it and
Yeah.
kind of fall on the lines of being appalled or, you know, I guess indifferent.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I mean, I think what Jennifer said, just doing it or starting at least as a feature article or two, or however many they want to do. And then if it gets traction, then we can move into, you know, the possibility of a column. And I guess that would be more on the writers and whether they want that pressure that Jennifer was referring to.
Yep. I'll
We
definitely
love content. Send us content, please.
I'll definitely pass the message on. The other thought that I had is when you guys were talking about the implicit bias diversity article and the implicit bias article, just because of the training I'm doing with the judges, I know that the Superior Court judges have just, they're about 2/3 through a 3-part intensive implicit bias training that apparently has been spectacular. And I can, you know, I'm going to be doing a training on Monday. I can ask some folks if anyone's interested. If you guys want that, it might be too much on implicit bias, but they were looking at implicit bias in the actual judicial system in terms of rulings and statistics. And in getting ready for this training, I talked to one judge who was in a larger district, a larger metropolitan area. And, you know, just as an example, just, you can call this judicial activism or trying, you know, equity versus equality. On Monday, she got a plea bargain. It was a white defendant with private retained counsel, and the facts of the case involved some kind of impairment pullover stop with multiple substances involved, and then a scuffle with the police. And so anyway, for the Monday plea got knocked down to some, to like just a DUI. And then on Thursday, an African-American defendant with a public defender, same exact facts. And it was like multiple felonies and multiple misdemeanors, and they had pled down to some kind of felony charge. And she called the elected DA in and said, what's the difference between Mondays and today's? And to the elected DA's credit, he said, there is no difference, and I'm willing to take the Monday plea for the Thursday defendant. And he explained in that particular case that he knew the privately retained defense counsel, and so the counsel called him directly to negotiate the plea, and he was unaware of the Thursday thing. But anyway, he did the honorable, you know, sort of equity thing. But these Superior Court judges are really looking at these kinds of issues. And I don't know if that judge would be willing to write an article about that experience, but there's a lot of this out there, a lot of discussions being had about equality versus equity. What does it really mean? And all that kind of stuff.
And one of the things that we've talked about in previous meetings, and it was kind of hard to identify exactly what an article could be like, but we were thinking, like, what angle could we find where somebody who is not the minority, like, you know, a white black male, I mean, a white male who is privileged, or a white female who is privileged, writing about their perceptions of implicit bias, and, you know, how we're learning about it, how we react to it. You know, we don't know exactly what that article would look like, but we were just saying, okay, we hear so much about what happens when you're the one who's being prejudiced against, but we're trying to figure out how to get a different angle. And, you know, someone like myself who doesn't have to deal with it other than being a woman, but, you know, just not having to deal with that on a day-to-day basis, and reactions to learning about it, or finding out things that I'm doing, like that's what implicit bias education is all about. The things that we're doing that we don't even know we're doing or saying, and we don't even know it, but just trying to get a different perspective. So I don't know exactly how to clarify.
It was funny. At our minority outreach conference, we had a panel one year, and one of the judges happened to say that when a white woman appears as a defendant before this judge, she has to like really be conscious of her implicit bias, because she's like, if a white woman is showing up here, you know, she thinks she's automatically guilty, and she has to, like, you know, innocent until proven guilty. And she was examining her own implicit bias, you know.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind. Let's see how we're doing. We've got 3 more minutes. And so on my list, I'm just throwing this out. We have not had any luck with this before, but I read an article yet again about John Grisham over the summer and found out he has a connection in Chapel Hill. He's a big Tar Heel fan. His family are all Tar Heels. And he just wrote a new book. And if there's any way that anybody through the 6 degrees of separation concept knows anybody who knows a Grisham, and we can maybe just get even a written, I mean, I would take just even like a 5-question written interview or something that where we can just benefit from his connection to North Carolina. Just keep that in mind. I've tried. I can't find anybody who has a connection with him, but maybe those who are closer to Chapel Hill can. So we've just not had luck before, but we're not going to stop trying. And the fact that he has a new book, I was hoping maybe the fact that he has a new book and the fact that he can't do probably as many book tours as he ordinarily would because of COVID, maybe this is a good time to reach out if we can.
So this is a long degree of separation, but I think Philip Lewis, who is a lawyer in Charlotte, who wrote a book a couple of years ago, I think he and John Grisham crossed on book tour or literary festivals during his publication process. Philip might have connection with John, and I'd be glad to reach out to Philip and ask that.
That would be awesome. I mean, it's just getting feelers out and seeing if we can make that connection. And like I said, this might be good timing since he does have a new book, and COVID might be affecting his schedule in a positive way for us. So the only other thing I had on my list is just something to think about, and that is, some bar journals have columns where, where people can write, the readers can write in and provide feedback. And have we ever done that, Jennifer? I'm just curious. We don't get a lot of feedback, but if we had an opportunity to email thoughts about articles, it might be nice to see the good, bad, and the ugly for us.
Do you mean sort of like letters to the editor?
Yeah, letters to the editor. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've been here 20 some years, and I think I can count on one hand the number of letters to the editor we've received.
Yeah.
I mean, people are always welcome to talk to us, and we even run an ad all the time in the journal talking about sharing your thoughts and ideas, with the journal. And that's more for soliciting ideas for articles, but certainly, our email address is prominent as far as how to contact us. I can't even remember if we've published one. The only one that really stands out to me was one that was, somebody was trying to get sort of in a back and forth argument over something in the journal, and Tom kind of put the kibosh on it because he's like, we're not getting into a back and forth in the magazine. Okay. So other than that, I get very little feedback.
Okay. Well, it was just something to think about if we ever, it's not like we have to make a decision right now. I'm just throwing that idea out if anyone thought it was worthwhile to explore. there's one, and I know we're out of time, but I have to admit, there's one thing that was not on the agenda that I just thought of that we need to real quickly address, and then we can wrap up. But that was the contest. Since this is live streaming, I don't know if we should be talking about that. Is that why it wasn't on the agenda, Jennifer? Or
Well, I was still getting feedback as of yesterday. So,
Okay.
And the deadline was, I guess, today to send in scores. So I have them all in a spreadsheet, and I think some of the responses I got yesterday might put a little wrench in what was already trending up into that point. So,
all right. So
I don't
bottom
have the
line
results
is,
yet.
so we do want to get that published in the next edition, right? Is that the
Not
goal?
this edition, but
Not this one. I'm talking about the
Right.
next, right, the next one. So just be aware that if we need to get a decision before the next meeting, we might be kind of doing some emailing back and forth to try to hone in on winners and which ones we want to get published, okay? All right, before we wrap up, anybody else have any thoughts that they want to share, ideas, or just things for us to start thinking about between now and the next meeting?
The only article idea I had was the State Bar's Regulatory Study Committee was formed in January. And at our meeting this month or last month, whichever it was, our most recent meeting, we talked about at some point wanting to share some information with you know, the bar at large, and maybe an article in the journal would be a good way to do that.
Okay, so we'll put that on the list, and we can talk about that next meeting and be thinking about it between now and then. Thanks.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm staff to that committee. I think that would be an excellent idea. And it actually could end up being sort of a series of articles. I think we're a little early in the process. But I will chat with Mark Enriquez, who's the chair of that committee, and he might be willing to co-author with me or Brian Oteen, who's also staffing that committee. But I agree with Camille that that's a subject that's really ripe. Well, it's not quite ripe.
Not quite, but we're going to be there.
It would be good for the journal. And as I said, it's a big topic. There's a lot going on. And so it might be something that we can do several articles on.
give me the name again. The State Bar Regulatory
Change, the study committee on regulatory change.
Okay.
And Jennifer, if you need something more specific, I can give you that. There's a couple of components to it. One of it has to do with what the State Bar does, but one of it has to do with looking at, and that's the study committee is not looking deeply into this, but in terms of what's happening at the national level, there's a real move on to look at alternative ways to deliver legal services to try to meet the access for justice gap. To deal with that, and not just for the very poor, but for the low middle who are also cut out of legal representation often. So that is part of it. Also, that's kind of going on at the same time. They're not related intentionally, but as a matter of subject matter, they're related, I think. There is a study group that is out of the Equal Access to Justice Commission that is looking at and doing actually a formalized study using researchers from UNCG of the gap in legal services and legal representation. Their results will probably come out from that sometime next year. I guess it's all public record because it's a part of a public agency, but that information, I think, would also be really interesting for us to have an article on at some point in time.
Okay, good. You got that, Jennifer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, anybody else before we sign off? Well, thank you for attending today. I'm sorry we can't do it in person. I'm very much looking forward to being able to do that again. So
I think we all are. Good job, Andy. Thank you.
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.